Theseus, the hero who slayed the evil minotaur. Theseus, the great hero who kidnapped a 10-year-old girl to be his wife. That 10-year-old girl was Helen of Sparta, which, yes, that's the same Helen who would later fall in love with Orlando Bloom and become Helen of Troy. But don't worry, Theseus wasn't planning to sleep with the child right away. No. He was gonna give 10-year-old Helen to his mother to groom her until the day she's old enough to be impregnated against her will.
What?
Oh, and our hero, Theseus, was also the reason that his own father committed suicide, and later Theseus killed his own son after Theseus' wife accused that son of raping her. Yeah, I'm out to ruin all your childhood heroes from Greek mythology. Actually, also that father that committed suicide only thought he was Theseus' father, but really his wife was secretly impregnated by the god Poseidon, making the god of sea and thirst and habitual rapist Theseus' actual divine father. In fact, pervy Aquaman raped Theseus' mother to have him in the first place, so I guess the apple didn't fall far from the tree. So let's talk some truth about this hero, Theseus, from him catching bodies when he was just a teenager to then becoming the teenage minotaur slaying inspiration behind Katniss and the Hunger Games to finally becoming the only child kidnapper saved from death row by Hercules, aka Heracles himself. Yeah, there's lots to talk about, so let's do this. Theseus' story starts with his then still childless father visiting his best friend, complaining about not having any children, about not having any sons. And then the best friend said, "Hey, why don't you get drunk and sleep with my daughter? She's like super fertile." And Theseus' dad said, "Bro, really?" And the friend said, "My daughter is your daughter. What are friends for, right? Don't forget that."
We're the three best friends that anybody could have.
I don't know why he's saying three best friends when there was just two of them, but that was an actual quote reenacted from back then, so what can I do? Of course, there was a reason that Theseus' father brought this problem up to his best friend in the first place. He was a king. Theseus' father was a king. He was King Aegeus, king of Athens, and having a male heir was kind of important. And his several wives weren't getting the job done, and instead of thinking, maybe if several women can't get pregnant by me and I'm the only common denominator, maybe I'm the problem. Instead of thinking that, King Aegeus went to an oracle and asked the oracle what he needs to do to get a son. And the oracle was very clear and precise in her reply and said, "Do not loosen the dangling foot of the wineskin before you return to Athens." And the king was like,
Yeah. I think I want my money back.
But when he visited his friend, King Theseus, they figured out that it translates to drinking wine and sleeping with his daughter. So here we are, a good friends doing what good friends do. And after spending the night with his best friend's daughter, Athra was then visited by Athena in her post-slept with my dad's best friend sex slumber dream. And Athena told Athra to get up, get out of bed and go to the beach. And since Athena is the protector goddess of women, Athra obviously did as she was told and went to the beach in the middle of the night, where she was then raped by Poseidon. Thank you, Athena. You're doing a wonderful job at protecting women. So now Athra was pregnant with Poseidon's child, a demigod, and King Cuckold Aegeus never found out that he's still shooting blanks, and he thought he produced the son. And King Aegeus was proud to finally have a male heir, and he was like, "Yes, winning, you still got it." But he knew if news got out, his rivals would try to assassinate the boy. So he told Athra to not tell anyone who the father is, because that's always a good look for any woman to act like she doesn't know who got her pregnant. Then Aegeus looked around, looked for the heaviest rock he could find, rolled up his sleeves and went to lift the rock like... And then he realized that the rock was too heavy and acted like nothing happened, picked a smaller rock, pushed it aside, placed his sandals and sword under that rock, and told Athra that only once the boy can lift this here rock and retrieve the sandals and the sword, only then can she tell him who his father is and tell him to come find him and become the rightful heir to the throne of Athens. And then he returned to Athens and left Athra to be a single mom that has to pretend she doesn't know who got her pregnant. So Theseus grew up without a father. He grew up with his mother and his pimp grandfather, King Pythius, who pimped out his daughter, which is the reason Theseus exists. And one day, Theseus' grandfather, King Pythius, received a visit from one of Greece's greatest heroes, Heracles, aka Hercules. And as Heracles was talking to the king, Theseus and the other kids were playing, and Heracles took off his lion-skin armor with the head still on it, and when the kids stumbled upon that lion armor, they thought it was a real lion, and they were all scared and ran away in fear, except Theseus. Theseus was like,
"You want to go to war? Come on. Do you want to go to war? We'll take you to war, okay?"
So Theseus took the sword of a nearby guard and impaled the already dead lion. Why the guard would let a 7-year-old disarm him, I don't know, but somebody probably lied on their resume. Heracles was impressed by Theseus' bravery and prophesied that Theseus would one day be a great hero. Fast forward 9 years, and at age 16, Theseus lifted the rock with ease. And he found the sandals and the sword and set off on his journey to find his father and his inheritance, the throne of Athens. King Pythius offered his grandson a ship and guards for the long journey to Athens, but Theseus scoffed at the idea. He had long assumed that he was divine and no mere mortal, so he told the king,
I know who I am, and I do not need your help.
And so, by himself, on foot, Theseus left his home to become the hero. The hero we now know him as. At age 16, the muscular and athletic Theseus set out on a journey to prove his worth and find the father who abandoned him as a child. Are we sure that Theseus wasn't black? And the long journey to Athens was literally a video game, riddled with adversity so that Theseus, could prove his strength against enemy after enemy, and by proving his strength, I mean killing all of them, because hero. First, Theseus met the bandit Periphetes, who was known to smash his victims' heads in with his club. So Theseus disarmed the scoundrel and smashed Periphetes' head in with his own club. Then Theseus ran into Skiron, a man that offered to wash people's feet at the edge of a cliff, but then he kicked them off the cliff to their death, because that's what got him going. And when he tried that with Theseus, Theseus kicked him off the cliff to his death. The next man Theseus ran into asked travelers to help him tie down pine trees, but then he cut the rope while the people were tying them down so that they would be catapulted to their death. Theseus tied the man up to a pine tree himself and then catapulted that man to his death. And then Theseus raped the man's daughter and got her pregnant.
Because that's what heroes do.
Next, Theseus was challenged to hand-to-hand combat by a man who claimed to be the greatest hand-to-hand combatant in the region. And the man had heard about Theseus, so he was like,
"You want to fight?"
Yeah, Theseus whooped the man, casually invented Roman wrestling while he was at it, became the first MMA fighter basically, and suplexed his opponent to death.
Lesnar went for the clothesline. Oh, suplex! How quick can Kurt Angle snap?
Then Theseus came across an evil boar. This boar was the offspring of Typhon, a monster that once almost usurped the throne from Zeus and the gods. So this son of Typhon, this boar, was far from an ordinary foe. It was pure evil and powerful beyond measure. After all that fighting and killing, Theseus had to rest, and luckily he stumbled across an inn owner that invited him in. The owner of the small inn only had 2 beds, and one of them seemed rather short, while the other was a little bit long, which is weird. And then it got weirder because it turns out that the owner would tie tall guests to the short bed and cut their limbs off to make them fit, and he would stretch short guests on the longer bed until their limbs tear off to make them fit said bed. But when he tried that with Theseus, Theseus instead tied the man up and cut his limbs off. Like a hero. Then, finally, 16-year-old Theseus arrived at his dad's King Aegeus' palace in Athens, but after 16 years, neither recognized the other, except the witch woman at the king's side, the sorceress Medea, who claimed she had seen Theseus in a prophecy which foretold that this boy would cause King Aegeus' death. So when Theseus was invited in for a welcome drink, he was immediately given poisoned wine. But when he raised the cup to drink it, King Aegeus suddenly recognized the sword, he recognized the sandals, and he remembered. This was his long-awaited son, oh my god. So he quickly slapped the poisoned wine out of Theseus' hand and embraced his son, the heir to the throne. And Medea, she was exiled for false prophecy, but it would later turn out that she was speaking the truth. Theseus was back at his father's side and introduced as the Prince of Athens, and with his divine power and the tales of his heroics, he quickly rose in popularity and renown. So it wasn't long before he stepped up to help Athens out of its greatest misery. Years ago, Athens had lost a war to Crete and its evil king Minos. And after the loss, Minos and his army oppressed the weak Athenians and made them pay a yearly tribute. King Aegeus had to send 14 kids under 18 as annual sacrifices, 7 boys and 7 girls. Those tributes were then taken to Crete to be eaten by King Minos' son, the Minotaur. And if you don't know who or what the Minotaur is, King Minos was ruler of Crete and super unpopular for wasting money. So in a bid to become more popular, he prayed to Poseidon for help. Like, oh great Aquaman, please, I want to be more popular. So can you give me a white bull and I'll sacrifice it in your honor, obviously, so that I'm more popular and you're more honored. Of course, Poseidon likes being honored, so he did his little god thing, and out of the oceans emerged the most beautiful white bull ever. So beautiful that King Selfish then decided to not sacrifice it and keep it, which majorly pissed Poseidon off, so he made Minos' wife, Pasiphae, fall in love with the bull. So Pasiphae put on a cow costume, rizzed up the bull, and after some probably very painful intercourse, 9 months later, the Minotaur was born, half human, half bull, with an appetite for human flesh. Now, with Theseus around, the Athenians finally had a way to fight back. So for this year's annual Labyrinth Games, Theseus was like,
I volunteer as tribute!
And so 16-year-old Theseus, who was basically a trained teenage assassin at this point, was sent to Crete. Before he left, though, Theseus promised his father that he would return with a raised white sail to let him know that he's alive and the Minotaur is dead, since usually the ship leaves and returns with a black sail to mourn the death of Athens' young tributes. And then, just before he set off on his journey, Theseus did one more thing. He prayed to the goddess of love, Aphrodite. He prayed to her to bless him on this journey, and he would forever worship her. Then he and the other young Athenians set sail, and once they arrived in Crete, Theseus and the others were thrown into the mysterious labyrinth. But first, Aphrodite's prayer came in handy. King Minos also had an all-human daughter, Ariadne, and the moment she set eyes on Theseus, she fell in love with him on the spot. Because what's a good teenage hero story without the subplot of a love that bridges the animosity of the lovers' fathers? Theseus rizzed Ariadne up so hard that she instantly decided to defy her father over this boy she had known for 5 minutes. She gave Theseus a sword and a ball of yarn, and when he entered the labyrinth, she held on to the end of that ball of yarn so that Theseus would find his way back. And then it was off into the labyrinth of the mighty Minotaur. And technically, this should be the climax part of the video, but in the labyrinth, Theseus just found the Minotaur, and the fight basically went something like this.
You ain't scared nobody. What you want to do? Come on, what you want, baby? You a joke. I ain't scared of you, man. I'm grown now. I'm grown. I ain't scared of you. What you want to do? What's up? Back it up, son. I ain't scared of you. I ain't scared of you. Back it up. I ain't scared of you. What's up, boy? You watch. What's up? You watch, Jordan. What's up? I'm going to eat pork, and I'm going to get real big, and I'm gonna kick your ass. Yeah, why don't you do it now?
Except that at the end of this fight, Theseus chopped the Minotaur's head off. Victorious, the demigod exited the labyrinth and threw the Minotaur's head in front of King Minos' feet and told him that this is the end of his oppression of Athens and that also he's taking his daughter too. And then Theseus and Ariadne and the other Athenians left Crete, and none of this makes any sense. Forget the fact that why would you have this all-powerful Minotaur weapon and you want tributes that should be killed? Why make them go through a labyrinth? Why make it a completely unnecessary labyrinth? But maybe for entertainment purposes. But what about the fact that Crete is still stronger than Athens? Why would the king just say, yeah, sure, you killed my weird bull son, and now take my daughter, take my balls while you're at it, and I'll leave Athens alone? It doesn't make any sense. But it is what it is.
It is what it is.
And what it is that Theseus came to Crete to kill a beast. But he found something much more precious: love. And so Theseus and Ariadne sailed back to Athens together and vowed each other eternal love, until Theseus got drunk and had visions of the god of wine Dionysus telling him that he wants to marry Ariadne and that Theseus should dump her. So Theseus immediately dumped her all by herself on the next island.
Smooth.
But in all this loving and drama and dumping and the excitement of his victory, Theseus forgot one thing. He forgot to exchange the sails on the ship, and he returned to Athens with the black sail raised. And his father, King Aegeus, was anxiously waiting for the safe return of his son, waiting and watching from the top of a cliff that overlooked the sea, waiting to see a white sail appear on the horizon to signal his son's safety and victory. But when he saw a ship with a black sail approaching, the king knew his son must have died, and so he jumped to his death into the sea below. Medea's vision came true. Theseus caused the death of his father, King Aegeus, and to this day we call the sea he jumped into the Aegean Sea in his honor. With his father dead, Theseus assumed the role of king of Athens, but that did not mean he was done being an adventurer. No, one day his friend and cousin, fellow demigod, son of Zeus, Pirithous, came to Theseus all distraught. Bro, my wife died. Oh, I'm so sorry. May she rest in peace. Yeah. I'm gonna need a new wife. And I'm thinking, I want you to come with me to kidnap Uncle Hades' wife, my half-sister, Persephone. And Theseus figured, yeah, what the hell, why not? And he also figured that if Pirithous is going for some good old incest, the only way Theseus can top that is by going for his 10-year-old niece, Helen of Sparta, the half-mortal daughter of Zeus, a girl that was prophesied to one day grow into her divine beauty and become the most beautiful woman in the world. So naturally, our hero Theseus wanted to lock that up before anybody else. Kidnapping a little girl wasn't too hard for two demigods, as you can imagine. They just killed whoever they had to kill and kidnapped the girl, and then Theseus gave young Helen to his mother so that his mom could groom her for him until Helen is able to bear children and Theseus can get her pregnant against her will.
Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait, first of all, you're not gonna speed past that like you didn't just say what you just said.
Now, getting to Persephone, though, that was a whole different story, because you don't just take the wife of a god, much less the queen of the underworld, wife of Hades, the king of the underworld. But we're not talking about two regular dudes here, we're talking about the demigods, Pirithous and Theseus. So when they kicked down the door to the underworld and started their two-man invasion, Hades was like... Yeah, they were immediately defeated, immediately. They had sat down on a rock after they came into the underworld to rest, plan, and scheme, and Hades tied them up with magical serpents and completely entangled and immobilized them so that he could casually finish lunch and then kill them after. You don't mess with Hades and Persephone. But as Theseus and Pirithous were facing death, literally, another hero, another demigod, appeared before them, and they could hardly believe their eyes.
Oh,
Hercules, Hercules, Hercules. Hercules, aka Heracles, the biggest cheat code in Greek mythology, was here because Heracles randomly had some business in the underworld. For the last of his famous 12 labors, he had to bring the hellhound Cerberus to the world of the living. And he just so happened to stumble upon the two tied up kidnappers. And because Heracles and Theseus go way back, remember when he was a kid and Heracles told him he would be a great hero one day, and now here he is after kidnapping a 10-year-old. Good prophecy, Heracles. Anyway, they go way back. So Heracles immediately freed his friend, but when he tried to free Pirithous, Hades himself appeared before Heracles, angry like,
They tried to kill my wife!
and Pirithous was like, bro, chill, I was just gonna kidnap her and force her to marry me, and you know what, now that I say it, I kinda see your point. So Heracles could not free Pirithous because even he didn't want that Hades smoke, meaning only Theseus was able to escape the underworld, while Pirithous' fate would eventually be to be eaten alive by Hades' hellhound Cerberus. Theseus meanwhile returned home to check on his child bride, only to find that Helen was rescued by her brothers Castor and Pollux and taken back to Sparta, and while the brothers were at it, they also kidnapped Theseus' mom Aethra, and they made Theseus' mom Aethra become Helen's personal slave. Karma. Aethra would in fact stay a slave until the Trojan War, but the story of the Trojan War, that's a video for another day. Of course, Theseus was still the king of Athens, and as a king, he had a kingdom to look after, and he needed a wife. So he figured he would accomplish the wife task by absolutely failing at the kingdom task. He started a war with the Amazons after he kidnapped the sister of the Amazons' queen to be his wife. Hey, at least this one was actually an adult. The kidnapped Amazon woman in question was Antiope, sister to Hippolyta, the queen of the Amazons. And Antiope and Theseus met while King Theseus was on a diplomatic mission to the land of the legendary Amazon warriors. But Theseus fell in love with Antiope on the spot, and kidnapping was kind of his go-to flirt move. So Antiope quickly found herself on an involuntary trip back to Athens. But even though the journey started against her will, Antiope did actually fall in love with Theseus, and the two married back in Athens and had a son, Hippolytos, named after Antiope's sister, the queen Hippolyta. And I feel like at some point somebody should have told Hippolyta that they're, in love, and named their son after her, maybe write her a letter or something. But no, the responsible diplomatic mastermind king of Athens, Theseus, forgot all about that, and so the queen of the Amazons launched an attack against Athens to get her sister back. Theseus and his men fought back and actually won the war against the Amazons, but in the chaos of the battle that was fought over Antiope's safety and love, Antiope died. Moral of the story: communication, man. If somebody would have just taken the time to explain the situation and talk, none of this would have happened. But here we are. Antiope is dead. And Theseus was so torn up over the death of Antiope that he actually stayed single until their son Hippolytos became a man. And it was only then that Theseus was like, wait, wasn't there once a woman that I left alone on an island? I wonder how she's doing. Wait, didn't she have like a 10-year-old sister back then? I mean, the sister's probably a bit too old for my tastes now, but it's about time I kidnapped myself a new woman. And so he did go and kidnap her and made her his wife. Phaedra is her name, and her and Theseus had 2 sons together. Meanwhile, Theseus' first son, Hippolytos, swore loyalty to the goddess Artemis, which meant he had to make a chastity vow for life. And remember how Theseus once swore loyalty to Aphrodite before he went to kill the Minotaur? Yeah, his son now becoming a forever virgin was a major loser move in Aphrodite's eyes, because the goddess of love wants everybody to get STDs or die trying, so Hippolytos' devotion to Artemis was a major breach of the worship contract she made with Theseus. And Aphrodite decided to punish Theseus' family by making his wife Phaedra fall in love with her stepson Hippolytos. This would have given us great material for the Orange and Black hub site if it wasn't for that damn chastity vow Hippolytos took. So unlike what the internet taught us to expect, this stepson actually said no to his stepmother. But Aphrodite's power is too strong. So even though he said no, Phaedra's love and desire for her stepson was unbearable. So unbearable that if she couldn't have him, she'd rather die. And since Hippolytus' devotion to his virginity was just as strong, Phaedra did take her own life. And to save herself from the embarrassment of having tried to sleep with her stepson, she wrote a suicide note saying that Hippolytus had raped her. Because that's the obvious solution to this problem. Theseus was devastated. This was the third wife he kidnapped and lost, so heartbroken and emotional, he read Phaedra's note, and when he read that his son raped his wife, he wasn't just emotional that his son had betrayed him.
But I am emotional about the fact that someone laid their hands on my wife. My wife!
Yet even our very tainted hero Theseus could not kill his own son with his own two hands, so he asked his father, Poseidon, to do the deed for him. And one day, the god of the sea sent a mad bull to suddenly emerge out of the ocean, just as Hippolytus passed on his horse-drawn chariot. The horses were so startled at the sight of the bull that Hippolytus lost control. His chariot flipped over with him caught in the reins, and the startled horses dragged Hippolytus to a certain death for miles. But Theseus, meanwhile, had learned the truth from his wife's servant, a servant that Phaedra had confided in, who told Theseus that this piece of paper, this will, these accusations,
it was all a lie. Guys, it was all a lie. She lied.
and Theseus rushed to save his son, but he got there late, and all he managed to do was hold his dying son in his arms while Hippolytus drew his last breath. And you could say that Theseus' tragic family life is maybe karma for all the bad deeds he committed in between his violent heroics. Maybe. And the Athenians surely thought so. They lost faith in their king. Theseus was quickly losing popularity amongst the people of Athens, and they forced him to give up the throne and chased him out of the city. Eventually, Theseus then found refuge on Skyros, an island kingdom, but having heard of Theseus' past, of his heroics and misdeeds, the king of Skyros feared that Theseus would one day usurp him and take the throne. So, pretending to show him the view of the island and its surrounding ocean, the king lured Theseus to the top of a mountain and then pushed Theseus down the cliff into the sea to his death. And that was the end of Theseus. Throughout his life, Theseus did heroic things, but just like one of his fathers, Poseidon, he caused just as much agony and darkness. And in the end, he died, just like his other father, the king, falling to his death off a cliff into the oceans below.